The Samsung S25 Ultra is one of the flagships of 2025, for many regarded as one of the best smartphones out there on the market. But today I wanted to focus on the cameras of the Samsung S25 Ultra, how good the photos and videos from this phone can actually be. But before we get into that, a real short recap on what this phone has to offer. It works on the Snapdragon 8 Elite, meaning you can play all the modern games in the highest quality settings, so it's super fast for daily usage. Most of the units come with 12GB of RAM, but you can get a 16GB of RAM if you choose the 1TB of storage. But even with the 12GB of RAM, I feel like for everyday users, it is more than enough. One of my favorite things about the Samsung S25 Ultra is definitely its screen. It is an AMOLED display that can go up to 120 frames per second, so 120 Hz. This is a super sharp screen. And it's protected by the Gorilla Armor too. There's one unique feature that I just love about this smartphone, which is the DX anti-reflective coating, meaning that this smartphone doesn't reflect as much of sun and light sources. And while maybe I cannot show you this on video really easily, but in person, it is probably the best smartphone screen I've seen just because of this feature. While it's not a matte finish screen, it doesn't have that blurry look to it. It doesn't reflect the lights as much as a normal screen, and thanks to this, it just looks so much better in my opinion. It just looks super nice, super sharp, because you don't have any reflections from anywhere. This makes it unique, but also, in my opinion, the best looking screen I've seen on a smartphone, thanks to this feature alone. And last but not least, there's an in-display fingerprint sensor, which is super fast and reliable as an ultrasonic sensor. It runs on the Android 15 with the Samsung One UI 7. In terms of battery, we have a 5000 mAh battery with 45W charging. In my opinion, in 2025, this is starting to be a little bit behind when compared to competition in the flagship categories. Phones like Xiaomi 15 Ultra, the Vivo X200 Pro have bigger batteries with much quicker charging, where other phones have 90W, 100W, or even 120W charging. This is still a 45W charging device. So even if it works for a little bit longer than a different smartphone would do, then you have to give it up for a much longer period before it loads up back to full power compared to the competition. So yes, it can probably last a little bit longer, but you have to give up the phone for much longer to recharge it again. There's also 15W of wireless charging and 4.5W of reverse wireless charging. And there's one key feature that the Samsung S25 Ultra has that other smartphones don't have, which is the stylus at the bottom of the smartphone, which you can actually use for writing, as you can probably hear. You can hear that it writes like a paper, notes. You can also sign things. So there's a lot of usage for it, but it's nice if you actually want to use that. But now let's get to the main topic of today's video, the cameras on the back. So the main camera is a 200 megapixel wide camera. It is a very good looking camera, I have to give it to them, but compared to competition where a lot of the different smartphones tend to go for even 1-inch sensors, this is starting to feel like it's falling behind a little bit. In low light situations and in everyday situations, it just feels like it's starting to be a little bit behind to what other smartphones can offer. And the one thing that I noticed that would actually go for all the lenses on this smartphone is the photos tend to look a little bit like a smartphone photo. It doesn't look like a camera photo, it just feels like a smartphone photo. Something that other brands make it more like a camera photo. In many ways, this can be actually because of the bigger sensor, but also the software behind it. The Samsung S25 Ultra just feels like a traditional camera on a smartphone, but a high-end smartphone camera, if that makes sense. And the main camera and other cameras too, for most part, tend to have those photos that just feel okay. They don't feel amazing. I never felt like this phone in any regard felt bad. I feel like everything that you have on this phone, even outside of camera, feels really good. It just doesn't feel the best. Like, it doesn't feel that it's better than the competition in pretty much any aspect. It just feels like everything that is here, you never have anything to complain about. So it's always good. If someone gets this phone and doesn't have something to compare, it's gonna feel like it's amazing. But once you start comparing, you feel that it does everything great, but it's never excelling in any specific thing. And that unfortunately goes to the camera. But the 200 megapixel main camera is definitely a good one, and it's definitely a flagship level in 2025. Like I said, I'm just a little bit nitpicking and comparing it to others. If you're interested in a camera smartphone. Then we have a 50 megapixel ultra wide angle lens, and this one is pretty nice, but in low light you can definitely feel that it's a little bit not as strong as the others, but for most part it is a really nice ultra wide angle lens. Then we have the 10 megapixel telephoto lens, and this in my opinion is the worst one of all the lenses on here. Because it's 10 megapixel, it isn't as just sharp as the other ones, and in low light situations, especially in video, when I really try to push the sensors, I've noticed that when I was changing from the main sensor to the telephoto lens, you could definitely feel how the blacks started to be a little bit more purple, and you could feel the grain creeping in. In my opinion, it just didn't feel as a premium as other competition has in 2025. Overall, in everyday situations, it's pretty nice, but in low light, it definitely falls apart the fastest. And then we have the 50 megapixel telephoto periscope lens. This gives us the most range out of all the lenses, and it's definitely a nice one to have. I feel like something like this on a smartphone is amazing to have. I feel like having so much reach is so nice. And with this being a 50 megapixel camera, it definitely feels like it's really nice. You can really zoom in and take nice photos. But once again, being that it's a little bit of a smaller sensor, it's not as big as the competition has in 2025, and because I have had the chance to test other flagship phones in 2024, 2025, it just feels like it's not something that is above the others. It just feels like it's great and it's good on this phone when you use it. But if you have two phones and you compare it, you see the stagnation of the Samsung. But it doesn't mean it's bad. It just my nitpicking when compared to other phones that I've tested. But other than that, it's still a really good lens, and if you zoom in, it really holds up the pictures a lot. Like, I feel like the zoom really holds up good, and you can feel the processing with each photo. Once it kicks in, the processing, it can really clear up the photo really nicely. And that leads me to one point that I wanted to mention. Overall, I noticed that compared to competition especially, this phone has been the slowest when it comes to taking the photo, going to the gallery, and then looking at it, because when you actually go into the gallery, it usually is circling a little bit, and before you actually see the final look, you have to wait a little bit until it stops circling, stops thinking, loading, and analyzing the photo until you have the final product. I felt like the competition is pretty much instant, but here you have to wait for a little bit. So whatever the case might be, it just felt like it was a little bit different than competition. It just felt like it's a little bit, slower than competition. But like I said, the end result is perfectly fine, and I feel like this is great for most smartphone users. I feel like most smartphone users are gonna say this is amazing, especially if you're really not into photography or you're just not nitpicking and trying to maximize your camera on the smartphone. But for those that really are enthusiasts, I feel like there's better alternatives. Coming back to what these cameras can do, you can shoot in HDR, you can also shoot in JPEG and RAW. With the RAWs, you can really take advantage of them in post-production, whether on the smartphone or on your computer later at home. Thanks to this, you can really take full advantage of the sensors that we have on Samsung S25 Ultra. But this is probably more for those that are really interested in that. And last but not least, we also have the Pro mode. So you have the professional settings that you can change while taking the photos, like the shutter speed or the ISO. In terms of the selfie camera, we have a 12 megapixel camera sensor here, and it's a pretty good selfie camera. Personally, I don't take a lot of selfies, so it's not something I'm gonna be really harsh about in terms of camera. If you're enjoying the music in this video or in any other of my work, or you need some copyright-free music for your own videos, check out the link down below for Epidemic Sound. You can get a 30 days free trial. In terms of video, the Samsung S25 Ultra has seen a nice upgrade, and here I feel like it's a really nice phone for that. You can shoot in up to 8K at 30 frames per second. Also in 4K up to 120 frames per second, which is really nice. I mostly would shoot in 4K 60 frames per second, which can be shot on all of the lenses, and you can seamlessly switch between all of them, which is one of the key features that I love about the flagships of 2025 and 2024, because that is one thing that I really like, when you can zoom in and zoom out while recording. You can also shoot in 4K 60 frames per second in HDR. But most importantly, you can shoot in 4K 60 frames per second in log on all of the camera lenses. And color grade in post-production, meaning that you can really take advantage of what this phone has to offer. The flat picture profile looks good, and it's pretty easy to work with. And thanks to this, you can really push the mobile videography with this phone. So in terms of video, I have to say that I'm really satisfied. It looks really good. The only caveat I would say is probably in low light performance once again. If you push it in 4K 60 frames per second in low light, in a very harsh low light, especially the 10 megapixel telephoto does start to be a little bit purple with a lot of grain compared to the other sensors, but other than that, in like a daily situation, this is a great smartphone for that. And once again, the selfie has a 4K 60 frames per second mode, but I personally don't shoot much video like that. But if you were into vlogging, this could be a great alternative. Overall, I feel like this smartphone does everything good. It does everything right, and the camera's performance is good. It just isn't anything that I would say is the best. It just doesn't feel like it's overpowering other competition, but it doesn't feel like it's doing anything wrong at the same time. It's a really hard phone for me to judge. It doesn't feel as exciting as others. It just feels a little bit more like a smartphone, where other phones are starting to be a little bit more like a camera. So I feel like it does everything right, and I guess thanks to it, it doesn't have a big camera bump as the competition, meaning that it's, I guess, a little bit more centered towards those that want a really solid device with not many problems to begin with. So if you're into something that is, you know, simple, everything works out of the box, just no problems, everything is fine, everything is really good on high level, and there's not any problems that you might find with it, not any downsides to it, then the Samsung S25 Ultra is definitely a great smartphone. And the camera performance, while it does feel like it's a little bit falling behind the competition in 2025, is still a great smartphone for photos and videos. Especially if you want something that just snaps the photos, easy to use, and is social media ready. With that being said, that is gonna be the end of today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video once again, and I'll see you next time.